Ohio State starts its Big Ten season on the road against a team who has not lost at home in 22 games. Ohio State against Washington for the first time as Big Ten opponents, and the first time the Buckeyes have been to Husky Stadium since 2007, a game that they also won. In fact, they've won the last 4 against the Huskies. So you got two things at play here. You got Ohio State's winning streak against Washington, and you got Washington's home winning streak, and a chance for one of these teams to go 1-0 in the Big Ten. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis, and these are our game picks. Ohio State, at the time we're recording this, is favored by 8.5 points with an over-under of 52.5. Andrew, you up first. What's your game score?
Ohio State 31, Washington 20. I think Ohio State covers, but I think we're going under in this one. I think this is one of those games that, I said, when we were doing our preview pod and stuff like that, and in the early part of this, I was like, I've struggled to get a read on it, and I brought up the Texas game from last year in the college football playoff. And I mentioned, Ohio State kind of scoring late and pulling ahead for a cover. But I think this is going to be a game where you look at it and go, Ohio State was the better team. Ohio State, you could debate maybe how much they were in danger of losing this game. I think we're probably headed for a 21-10 type of game that becomes 21-17 for a drive, and then it's 24-17 for a drive. And I think, stuff like that. I think that's where we're headed. I think Washington is just going to stay within striking distance, but I just don't think they have the talent to deliver a knockout punch or knockout punches. And against a team like Ohio State with as much talent as you have, you kind of need that. So I do think Ohio State is in for a battle. Again, we've talked about it on the preview pod as much as we could. Tough place to play, talented team. It's going to be a challenge for this group of guys. They're going on the road, and we talked so much about how last year's team overcame all this adversity, and this year's team is going to have to do the same thing. I think what happens if you're in a situation where it's 7-0 because Washington hits a big strike early, and now you're down on the road and that place is at fever pitch. So this is going to be a tough challenge. And I think Washington's going to hang around, but Ohio State just has too much. And I think we're going to get to the end of the game and Ohio State will pull ahead by 2 scores and win the game. But I don't think it's going to necessarily be pretty. And we will leave this game going, Ohio State's good. They've got some things to work on. That was a really tough environment. And Washington gave them a really, really nice challenge. And Washington, they might be a force. They're maybe not a playoff team, but they're pretty good.
Stefan, what's your game score?
Yeah, I'm going similar vein to Andrew, but a little bit more separation. I'm going Ohio State 41, Washington 21. I do think Washington is going to hit a quick strike early. I do think the crowd is going to be able to be pretty engaged during the first half, but I just keep coming back to I'm not sure if Washington's defense can do enough to slow down Ohio State's offense. I think this Washington offense is good and explosive, and also has, an awesome running back in Coleman. But scoring 21 points on Ohio State's defense is pretty impressive based on what we saw, in that season opener against Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's enough. 21 points, I just don't think it's enough. I don't think Washington's defense can keep Ohio State below 40 points. Now, if we want to nitpick, I went with the 41 because I've got some questions. If you listen to Buckeye Talk, we just talked about this. I do still have some questions about Ohio State's execution in the red zone, and maybe they have to settle for a couple field goals. But I think as the game goes down, as Julian's saying, settles into this environment, I think he's going to see, my receivers are getting open, right? If it's not Jeremiah Smith, if it's not Carnell Tate, on outrageous predictions, I said that Brandon Inniss could have a pretty big game in this one, and I think he's going to. So just too many weapons for Ohio State, or I should say for Washington's defense to try to limit. So I have Ohio State 41, Washington 21. That is 62 points. What was the over-under again?
52.5.
Yeah. So I'll take the over and I'll take Ohio State to cover.
Washington has looked really awesome. They also haven't played anybody with a pulse yet, let alone someone with the firepower that Ohio State has shown to have on both sides of the ball. Now, the defense is maybe a little bit more proven than the offense right now, given that they've played a ranked opponent already and they held them to 7 points in that game and quite frankly, almost shut them out. They were very close to shutting out Texas. Granted, Texas was also close to tying that game. So 2 things can be true in that situation. And on offense, Jeremiah Smith still exists and Carnell Tate still exists. And so even if you're still maybe having a few questions about Julian Sand, you don't have any questions about his top two weapons. I went with a score of 41-13. This game I think we're overthinking it a little bit with this game. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll come on this spot afterward and I'll say I'm wrong. But this game feels very, if you remember when Ohio State went to Nebraska in 2019, and Nebraska was kind of on the verge, right? They had a young quarterback who was a mobile threat, Adrian Martinez, who had been showing some promise. And this was supposed to be Nebraska's finally ready to carry some weight in the Big Ten. And then Ohio State went down there, punched him in the mouth early, and never looked back. And I think we might see a similar situation here of Washington's a very good football team. I'm not taking away from Washington. They're just not there yet. And, you know, a Chrysler, you know that Chrysler car that looks like the luxury, like Phantom car? You know that car? Stefan knows what I'm talking about. And then you see like an actual Phantom pull up, and you're like, oh, that's actually what that car looks like. That's what I think this game might be. Washington has some talent. I think Denzel Boston, one of the best receivers in the country. In fact, I think him and Carnell Tate are on a short list of people fighting to be wide receiver one in that NFL draft next April. Jonah Coleman, I think it's him and Justice Haynes are the two best running backs in the Big Ten right now with the way they perform. Damon Williams Jr., I mean, Ryan Days called him Kyler Murray. Matt Patricia's called him Kyler Murray, right? Jed Fish went out of his way to go get Damon Williams back when he was at Arizona. And now, obviously, they've now linked up here at Washington. But quality quarterback. There's a lot of good quarterbacks around the Big Ten right now. But I'm just not sure it's enough when they've been able to go full throttle for 3 straight games and not really have anybody make them pay for their deficiencies. Because Ryan Day always says the issues are there, regardless of who you're playing. It's whether or not you're fixing those issues. And I do feel like Washington might have a harsh reality in seeing, oh, our issues are actually a problem that can cost us now that we're playing against a team that can not only poke holes, but just like hammer them to death, right? And so 41-13 is my score, where I think it's a close first quarter, but at some point, Ohio State's going to start throwing the haymakers, and Washington is playing against a defense who can stop them, who can limit the explosive plays, who can look them in the eye and look their best weapons in the eye and go, maybe we're a little bit better than you. So maybe good. I think it's going to be a good year for Washington. I just don't know if this is the type of game where it's going to be as competitive as I think we're all starting to think maybe the anticipation of it is saying it's going to be. And it's because Washington's won 22 straight at home, and Husky Stadium's a hard place to play. So 41-13 is my score. That's taking Ohio State in the points, and obviously that's an over at that point. Those are our game scores. Get the text 614-350-3315, a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And if you're watching on YouTube and you love our smiling faces, we go live every Wednesday at noon, and we go live before the games, and sometimes we go live after the game when the game warrants it. And don't listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. And if you're already listening on Buckeye Talk, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and look around the rest of the country because it's a banger of a week, baby. See you after the break.